There is a particular kind of silence that settles inside a person who has begun to see through things. Not the silence of emptiness, not the quiet of someone who has given up, but something stranger and more unsettling than either of those. It is the silence of someone who used to believe in the noise, who used to chase the approval, the validation, the belonging, and who one day simply stopped. Not because they found something better to replace it with, not yet, but because something inside them became too honest to keep pretending. If you have ever felt that shift, if you have ever stood in a room full of people and felt more alone than you do when you are by yourself, if you have ever nodded and smiled and said the right things while something deep inside you watched from a distance and felt nothing, then you already know what this video is about before I say another word. That feeling you have been carrying, that strange mixture of clarity and grief, of freedom and loneliness, is not a symptom of something broken. It is a sign. And today, Nietzsche is going to tell you exactly what it means. Most people will spend their entire lives without ever questioning the invisible architecture that shapes every choice they make. They will wake up, follow the schedule, want the things they were told to want, fear the things they were taught to fear, and die without ever once asking who built the road they spent their whole life walking. Nietzsche called this the herd. Not as an insult, not as a way of dismissing people who live this way, but as a precise and honest description of what happens when a human being allows culture, religion, social pressure, and collective fear to become the author of their inner life. The herd is not evil. The herd is simply the name for people who have never been disturbed enough to wake up. And here is the uncomfortable truth that changes everything. The process of waking up does not feel like enlightenment. It does not arrive wrapped in peace. It arrives wrapped in confusion, in discomfort, in the terrifying sensation that the ground beneath your feet is no longer solid. The first sign that you have entered the phase most people never reach is precisely this: the loss of innocence about the world, not the loss that comes from trauma, but the loss that comes from seeing. When Nietzsche wrote about the death of God, he was not writing about theology. He was writing about the moment a person loses their inherited framework of meaning, the moment when everything they were handed as children, the values, the certainties, the purpose, the sense of where they belong in the order of things, collapses under the weight of honest examination. This is not a comfortable moment. Nietzsche described it as standing in the open sea with no horizon in sight. Most people, when they feel this collapse beginning, run back to the shore. They double down on old beliefs. They find new tribes. They fill the silence with noise, with scrolling, with busyness, with any available distraction that delays the reckoning. But a small number of people do not run. They stay in the water. And if you are watching this video, if you have felt that collapse and stayed with it instead of fleeing it, then you are already inside something most human beings will never enter. The second sign is this: you have stopped running from the void and started learning to inhabit it. The third sign is more subtle and more personal. It shows up in the way your relationships begin to shift. You start to notice that certain conversations leave you feeling drained in a way you cannot quite explain. Not because the people are unkind, not because they have done anything wrong, but because something in you has moved to a different frequency and the connection no longer runs as deep as it once did. Nietzsche understood this as an inevitable consequence of self-overcoming. As a person begins to examine their values more seriously, to question what they genuinely believe rather than what they were conditioned to believe, they naturally begin to outgrow certain shared fictions. The difficulty is that the people around them often have not made the same movement. And so there is a loneliness that comes not from rejection but from growth, a loneliness that cannot be fixed by finding more people, only by finding the right ones, or by learning to carry the solitude with dignity. And this is the place where I want to stop for a moment and speak directly to you, not as a narrator, not as a voice delivering ideas, but as someone who understands what it costs to be in this place you are in. Because if any of this resonates, if you have felt that strange combination of expansion and isolation, of knowing more and belonging less, then you have probably carried this quietly for a long time. Maybe you have tried to explain it to someone close to you, and watched their eyes glaze over. Maybe you have felt guilty for outgrowing things that used to feel like home. Maybe you have wondered whether something is wrong with you because you cannot just be happy with what everyone else seems satisfied by. You are not broken, you are becoming. And that process is one of the loneliest and most important things a human being can go through. If this speaks to something you have lived, I want to ask you to do something right now. Go to the comments and write, "I'm in the becoming." Not because it is a ritual, not because it changes anything technically, but because there is someone else watching this video right now who is going through exactly what you are going through, and they need to know they are not alone in it. Your words in that comment section could be the thing that makes another person feel seen for the first time in years. That matters more than you know. The fourth sign brings us into deeper territory, and it is where Nietzsche becomes truly radical. It is the moment you begin to examine your own values, not just the values of society, but the ones you thought were entirely your own. Because here is what Nietzsche discovered after years of relentless philosophical excavation. Most of what we call our values are not ours. They are inherited, they are borrowed. They are the residue of centuries of cultural, religious and familial conditioning that was installed in us before we had the capacity to consent to it. The process of examining this is what Nietzsche called the revaluation of all values, and it is not an intellectual exercise. It is a form of inner violence. It is the experience of holding up of something you love, something that has oriented your entire life, and asking with total honesty, did I choose this or was it chosen for me? That question, when asked sincerely, detonates something inside a person. And the fourth sign that you have entered this phase is simply that you have begun asking it. The fifth sign is the emergence of what Nietzsche called the will to power, but here is where most people misunderstand him completely, and where this idea becomes genuinely transformative. Will to power has nothing to do with domination over others. It has nothing to do with ambition in the conventional sense, with money or status or control. It is something far more internal and far more demanding. The will to power, in Nietzsche's precise formulation, is the drive to overcome oneself. It is the refusal to remain at the level of what is comfortable, what is familiar, what is accepted. It is the impulse that makes a person look at their own weakness and say, I'm going to go there, not around it. When you begin to feel this impulse not as arrogance, but as a kind of sacred responsibility toward the self you are capable of becoming, you have entered the fifth sign. The tragedy is that most people confuse this drive with aggression or ego and suppress it. The few who recognize it for what it truly is begin to use it as fuel for a completely different kind of life. The sixth sign is perhaps the most psychologically demanding of all. It is the moment you begin to take full responsibility for your own suffering. Not in the way that self-help culture uses that phrase, not as a motivational instruction to stop complaining and be grateful, but in the radical Nietzschean sense. Nietzsche believed that the most dangerous thing a person could do was to locate the source of their pain in something external to themselves, whether that be other people, circumstances, society, or fate. Not because external causes do not exist, they do, but because the moment a person fully internalizes that they are the author of the meaning they assign to their experience, everything changes. The suffering does not disappear, but the relationship to it transforms completely. Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of fate. Not the acceptance of fate in a passive sense, not resignation, but the active embrace of everything that has happened as precisely the material from which a person builds themselves. The sixth sign is that you have stopped trying to escape your history and started asking what it made possible. And the seventh sign is the one Nietzsche saved for the rarest of people. It is the emergence of what he called the Übermensch, not as a finished state, not as a destination you arrive at and unpack your bags, but as a direction, a vector, a perpetual orientation toward becoming more than you currently are without requiring the permission, the validation, or the approval of anyone outside yourself. The seventh sign is that you are no longer waiting for someone else to tell you that your life has meaning. You have accepted, at a level deeper than thought, that the creation of meaning is your responsibility alone, and that this is not a burden, but the most profound form of freedom available to a conscious human being. This is where Nietzsche parts ways with almost every other philosopher in the Western tradition. He does not hand you a system. He does not offer you a doctrine. He removes every net and tells you to jump and to trust that the falling itself is the point. Here is what no one tells you about this phase, though. And this is the part that recontextualizes everything. The 7 signs are not sequential. They are not a ladder you climb from the bottom up. They are more like weather patterns that move through you in waves, sometimes all at once, sometimes returning when you thought you had already passed. Through them, you can be in the 6th sign and suddenly find yourself back at the 2nd. You can feel the 7th sign with crystal clarity one morning and lose it entirely by the afternoon. This is not failure. This is the actual texture of becoming. Nietzsche himself described his own life as a series of collapses and recoveries, of moments of devastating clarity, followed by long stretches of ordinary confusion. The becoming is not a straight line. It never was. And the fact that you are still here, still watching, still asking the questions that most people have already given up on, means you have not left this path. You are on it. And that alone is worth something enormous. So this is where we arrive, not at an ending, but at an opening. Because the real question this video leaves you with is not whether you recognize yourself in these 7 signs. You already do, or you would have stopped watching long ago. The real question is what you do now that you can name what is happening inside you. Nietzsche's answer would not be gentle, but it would be true. He would tell you that the recognition itself changes nothing unless it is followed by the willingness to go further, to take the discomfort of the becoming and turn it into the raw material of a life that no longer apologizes for its own depth. That is the invitation. Not the comfortable one, but the real one. If this video reached something in you that has been waiting to be reached, the most important thing you can do, right now, more important than sharing it, more important than thinking about it later, is to give it a like. Not for a number on a screen, but because the algorithm responds to that gesture, and the algorithm is what determines whether this kind of content finds the people who are sitting alone, right now feeling exactly what you felt at the beginning of this video. Your like is how this message travels. If you want Nietzsche's ideas to reach someone who needs them tonight, that single gesture is how you make it happen. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I want to say something honest to you. This channel was not built for everyone. It was built specifically for people who have already felt the ground shift beneath them and chose to stay standing anyway. Every video here is made with one intention: to give language to the experiences that feel too large or too strange or too honest for ordinary conversation. If that is the kind of thing you want more of, the subscribe button is there. No pressure, no performance. Just a door left open for you to walk through whenever you are ready.